The Wednesday morning sun streamed through the bay windows of my mother's cozy cottage, dappling the worn Persian rug and catching the steam rising from our matching china teacups. Chamomile with a whisper of honey, our ritual. My mother, Eleanor, was alive and well, her silver hair catching the light as she carefully turned the page of her novel. The only sound was the gentle tick of the grandfather clock and the distant chirp of sparrows. Then my phone rang, shattering the peace. The screen flashed. Juliana. My sister. A knot of cold tension formed in my stomach, but I kept my voice light. "Hey, Jules, you're up early." "Ava." Her voice was a masterpiece of strained grief, a performance honed over a lifetime of manipulating our parents. It was thick with tears that didn't exist. I have terrible news." I met my mother's gaze across the table, her eyebrows raised in question. I put the call on speakerphone, laying the device gently on the quilted tablecloth between us. "What is it?" I asked, my tone perfectly calibrated to concerned sister. A sob, artfully choked. "It's Mom. She passed last night, in her sleep. The hospice nurse found her this morning." My mother's eyes went wide, then narrowed into slits of icy fury. She set her teacup down with a sharp clink. I placed a calming hand over hers, my own heart hammering with a dark, vindictive thrill. "Oh, Juliana," I breathed, pouring syrup into my voice. That's awful. Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," she snapped, the grief cracking to reveal impatience beneath. She recovered quickly, sniffling. "I'm at the lawyer's office now, handling the arrangements." Handling the assets, she meant. Our mother wasn't in hospice. She was in remission, her cancer beaten back by a brutal but successful treatment I had overseen for the last 18 months, while Juliana had been too busy with her new life in the Hamptons. "The funeral is Friday," Juliana continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, somber tone. "Very private, just family. Well, my family. And, Ava, I have to tell you this. It's going to hurt. Mom's will, she updated it last month. She left everything to me. The cottage, the investments, Grandma's jewelry, everything. She said you were too much of a disappointment, that you'd never amount to anything. She wanted it all to stay with real family." Each word was a precisely aimed dagger, meant to wound and impoverish in one blow. She was claiming not just our mother's death, but her rejection of me. I looked at my mother. Real tears of hurt and betrayal were now streaming down her lined cheeks, but not for the reason Juliana imagined. They were for the monstrous daughter on the phone. I squeezed her hand, and then I smiled. A wide, slow, genuine smile of pure, undiluted triumph. "Is that so?" I said into the phone, my voice steady as stone. "I know it's hard to hear," Juliana said, a hint of gloating seeping through the false sympathy. "But it's what she wanted. You get nothing. I suggest you make other living arrangements. I'll be sending a realtor to appraise the cottage next week." "Friday, you said?" I asked, my eyes locked with my mother's. She wiped her tears, a steely resolve hardening her features. She gave a single, imperceptible nod. "Yes, 11 a.m., St. Margaret's. Don't bother bringing flowers." She hung up. The line went dead. The sunny, quiet room felt charged, electric. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling with rage. "Hospice? She has me in hospice? And the will? My God, Ava, I would never. You know I would never." "I know, Mom," I said softly, the smile still on my face. But she doesn't. She's been waiting for this, planning for it. And she had. Juliana had always been the grasping one, the one who saw family as a ledger. When Mom got sick, Juliana visited twice, both times to rifle through paperwork and ask about estate planning. I had moved in, taken a leave from my teaching job, managed medications, held her hair back during chemo-induced nausea, read to her through the worst of the pain. Juliana sent a fruit basket. The updated will was a fiction. The real will, drafted 5 years ago, split everything evenly. It was in the safe deposit box, a fact Juliana either didn't know or chose to ignore in her greed. This call wasn't just a lie, it was a trap. Juliana was trying to shock me into submission, to make me believe I was disinherited and homeless, so I wouldn't contest anything, so I'd simply vanish from the picture while she swooped in to claim her prize. But she'd made one fatal error. She'd declared my mother dead before she'd bothered to verify it. "What?" my mother said, her voice now cold and clear, the voice of the formidable corporate secretary she'd once been. "What do you want to do?" I picked up my cooling teacup, took a sip, and savored it. "I think," I said, "we should go to a funeral on Friday." The game was on, and Juliana had just handed me the winning move.
The 48 hours before the funeral were a whirlwind of silent strategy. Our first move was legal. With Mom by my side, we visited her lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a man who'd known us since I was in pigtails. His outrage at Juliana's fraudulent claims was profound. He not only confirmed the validity of the existing will, but also suggested we file a police report for attempted fraud. We decided to wait. The shock factor was a weapon we wanted to wield ourselves first. Next, we secured the cottage. Mr. Henderson helped us change the locks and install a security system with cameras. Juliana had a key, and we wouldn't put it past her to try and secure her asset before the fictional funeral. Then we planned our entrance. Mom needed to be seen, alive and well, by as many credible witnesses as possible. The funeral itself was the perfect stage. Juliana would have invited a small circle, people who would serve as her echo chamber, who would believe her narrative without question. We needed to shatter that narrative utterly. We also dug. With Mr. Henderson's help, we discovered Juliana had already taken steps. She had contacted the bank, claiming to be the executor of a non-existent will, attempting to freeze Mom's accounts. The bank, following protocol, had put a temporary hold, which only added to her confidence. She'd also listed the cottage with a high-end realtor friend of hers, with a probate sale clause. Her arrogance was her blind spot. She was moving so fast to claim her phantom inheritance that she left a paper trail of fraud in her wake. The morning of the funeral dawned gray and drizzly, a perfect cliché. Mom dressed with care in an elegant dove-gray suit, not a shred of black. "I'm not mourning myself," she said dryly, fastening her pearls, the very pearls Juliana had already mentally added to her jewelry box. I wore a simple black dress, my face a mask of solemn anticipation. We drove to St. Margaret's in silence, the weight of the impending confrontation settling between us, not as fear but as resolve. The small historic church was just as Juliana had promised, private. A handful of cars were parked outside, belonging to her husband's family and a few of their society friends who'd always looked down on our modest, bookish branch of the family. We parked around the corner. "Ready?" I asked. Mom took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "For that viper, let's go give her the shock of her life." We entered through a side door, slipping into the shadowy vestibule. The main chapel was up a short flight of stairs. We could hear the somber organ music, the hushed whispers of maybe 15 people. And then Juliana's voice pitched in a carrying theatrical whisper to a woman in a ridiculous black veil. Such a peaceful passing. She just didn't wake up. And poor Ava, she's taking it so hard she couldn't even come. The disinheritance, you know, it broke her. My mother's hand tightened on my arm. Her jaw was set. We waited until the organist finished the prelude. As the minister, a man Juliana probably paid handsomely for his discretion, stepped up to the lectern and cleared his throat, we made our move. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to mourn the passing of... I'm afraid you've been misinformed. My mother's voice, clear and strong, rang out from the back of the chapel. Every head in the pews swiveled. The scene that unfolded was one of pure Gothic horror for Juliana. Her color drained from her face so completely she looked like a marble statue. Her eyes bulged, her mouth hung open in a silent, choked scream. She took an involuntary step back, as if from a ghost, which to her, Mom was. Gasps echoed. The minister stared, his notes fluttering from his hands. Mom began to walk slowly down the center aisle, I beside her. The click of her heels was the only sound. She stopped a few feet from the front pew where Juliana stood frozen. You seem surprised to see me, Juliana. You shouldn't be. You declared me dead. The least you could do is show up to your own fabrication. Juliana's husband, David, stood up, sputtering. Eleanor, what is the meaning of this? This is a sick joke. The joke, I said, speaking for the first time, my voice cutting through the chaos, is the call I received on Wednesday, where Juliana told me you were dead, Mom, and that you disinherited me, leaving everything to her. I held up my phone, playing the recorded call, Juliana's voice performing grief and delivering her cruel coup de grace filled the sacred space. She left everything to me. You get nothing. She said you were too much of a disappointment. The faces in the pews transformed from confused to horrified to disgusted. These were her people, her witnesses, and they were seeing the raw, ugly truth. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Juliana found her voice a shrill, desperate thing. It's a fake. She's manipulating you. Mom, tell them you're sick, you're confused. Mom looked at her oldest daughter, and in that look was a lifetime of hurt and a final, irrevocable dismissal. The only sickness here, Juliana, is in your soul. You are no daughter of mine. She turned to the stunned congregation. I apologize for this spectacle. There will be no funeral today. As you can see, I am very much alive. My will remains unchanged, and my daughter, Ava, is my sole heir in character and in law. Now, if you'll excuse us, my real daughter and I have brunch reservations. She took my arm. Together, we turned and walked back up the aisle, leaving a ruin of shattered lies and an utterly destroyed Juliana in our wake. The trap had been sprung, and she had walked right into it.
The fallout was swift and merciless, a social and legal avalanche. By the time our Eggs Benedict arrived at the Sunny Cafe, Mr. Henderson had already been on the phone. The police, now armed with our statement and the recording, paid a visit to Juliana at the church. Charges of attempted fraud, filing a false police report, the death certificate she'd hinted at, and harassment were discussed. To avoid criminal prosecution, Juliana agreed to a brutal set of terms drawn up by Mr. Henderson, a legally binding public apology to me and our mother sent to every attendee of the funeral, a renunciation of any claim to the estate beyond the original will's provisions, which Mom, in her heartbreak and fury, amended on the spot to leave Juliana a single symbolic $1, and a complete no-contact order. Her social standing in her precious Hampton circle evaporated overnight. The story was too deliciously grotesque not to spread. The woman who had tried to bury her mother alive for a cottage and some pearls. Her husband filed for divorce within the month, unwilling to be tied to the scandal. Mom and I returned to the cottage, but it felt different, lighter. The ghost of Juliana's venom had been exorcised.
We spent the next weeks in a peaceful, healing routine. We sorted through old photos, not to dwell on the past, but to reclaim the happy memories Juliana had tried to poison. I went back to teaching, but with a new perspective. The quiet strength I'd found in facing down my sister, the fierce love I'd shared with my mother in our conspiracy of truth, it changed me. I was no longer the disappointment, the quiet, bookish daughter. I was the guardian, the warrior. Mom, freed from the emotional burden of Juliana's manipulations, flourished. She joined a gardening club, something she'd always wanted to do but felt Juliana would deem common. She started writing her memoirs, not for publication, but for me. One evening, months later, we were back in our familiar spots by the bay window, teacups in hand. The sparrows were chirping. "Do you ever wonder," Mom asked quietly, "what we would have done if she'd just called to check on me? Just once?" I thought about it. The vast, tragic simplicity of it. Then we wouldn't have known. We'd have always wondered if her love was real. Now we know it wasn't. In a terrible way, she gave us the truth. And the truth, however ugly, sets you free. Mom nodded, her eyes wise and sad. She was my trap. My whole life I was trying to earn the love of a child who only saw me as a vault. And you, my darling, were the key all along. We never heard from Juliana again. The $1 check was never cashed. Sometimes the most expensive inheritance is the one you're spared. My sister called to tell me my mother was dead and I was nothing. She meant to break me, to erase me, but her lie was the anvil upon which my life was finally truly forged. She tried to orchestrate a funeral, and instead she buried her own chance at redemption. I didn't just get my inheritance, I got my mother back, I got my home back, and I discovered a steel in my spine I never knew I had. All because my greedy sister made one phone call too soon, and I chose to answer it with a smile and a witness sipping tea beside me.